Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight for our Year 7 and 8 Parent Information Evening. I'm going to now pass to Mr. Paul Begg, our new principal, as he leads us for a welcome and prayer.
Well, good evening and welcome. My name is Paul Begg and I'm the principal of Villanova College, and I'm certainly honoured to take on that role in 2022. My role tonight here is simple. It is to begin with prayer and to welcome you to the Year 7, 8 and 9 Parent Information Session. In these COVID times, it is always a little bit interesting because you can watch it whenever, the morning, the afternoon, the evening, and it is still good information and you get to meet the people you need to meet. Remember, you are always welcome to contact us here at the school, and our current rules are, of course, that we limit numbers on the campus, but parents are still welcome to come to speak about their sons. At Villanova College, prayer is an important part of our identity, and I'd like to begin with a special prayer this evening. Your sons this year will come across this book, the Augustinian Examen. An examen is an idea of self-reflection and thought, a series of questions that asked us in prayer to consider ourselves and our place in the world around us. One of our values is, of course, community, and that's where I'd like to start with your prayer at home. I'll read a small question and I'll just ask you to think about what has that been for you today. Obviously, in the Catholic tradition, we always begin our prayer with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And so, in the examen of community, we ask, how was my life in community today? How did I contribute to the common good? How did I give to those around me? With whom did I collaborate? Did I share myself and my talents? As I move forward tomorrow, whom do I need to reach out to help, to build strong the people around me? And finally, were there talents today in my work, in my family, that I withheld, that I didn't share? And how will I contribute to them, to community tomorrow? And it is the answers to these questions to which we ask for your guidance, O Lord. And this is our prayer. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I do thank you for your time to watch this, to learn a little bit more about how we will guide your son at Villanova across this year. It has been an interesting start. It has been a good start though. It's just been different. The way in which we are still looking to develop fine men in your boys hasn't changed. Our challenge to them is to be their very best, to develop the best version of them. And we do that through the growth of our values. Now, as Year 7s and Year 8s and Year 9s, that is difficult because they are developing. So it is about reminding them of what we expect, of encouraging them to become the Villanova graduate. And so we will talk to them about humility, that idea that, of course, we're proud of what we do. We work hard in our endeavours. But we also remember that what we do, what we achieve, our success is not just for us. Our success is for others at Villanova. Our success is about what we share. How do we grow as community? How do we grow our class? When we're successful, everyone's successful. When we fail, everyone fails. So we work together to get to the next step. We talk about interiority, that challenge to look inside ourselves for truth, to look inside ourselves and discover a little bit more. We learn about ourselves in that slow journey forward through reflection to grow our identity. We've spoken of community and the importance of connection with one another. And as parents, your connection to us. We partner with you in this educational journey. We're not doing it alone and you're not doing it alone. It is a partnership. The notion of ongoing conversion and transformation We do want to build on this journey, and the middle school is so vitally important as boys come to terms with who they are, as boys understand what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy. The hardest thing, of course, in this time is relationships and the transformation of our young men and their relationships. They leave childish behaviours behind. They develop new interests. They develop new challenges. And sometimes that comes with stress. Sometimes that comes with the fracture of friendships, the change in friendships. And we at Villanova and our staff will manage that with your boys. But it is the hardest thing that we'll have to do. The notion of ongoing conversion and the transformation of friendships and your young boy as he moves towards adulthood. And finally, I suppose, the restless search for truth. Encouraging in your son to continue to look for the answers, to pose questions to his teachers, to pose questions to society, and look for the answers. Find answers, collaborate to find answers, work together with others, to be interdependent. We want independence, but we can't forget to be interdependent. So I suppose my expectation of your son is that he delivers his very best. It's about developing the habits of success. It's not about A's or B's or C's or D's. It's about, are they working each day to develop habits, to work towards precision, to work towards clarity, to strive for accuracy, to respond with wonderment, joy, and have fun in their day, to never consider a failure as a negative, to never consider success as the end. That's what we want of our young Villanova men. So thank you so much for joining with us this evening. I hope you get good information, and always remember, reach out and ask the question of us so we can work forward with your boy with positiveness and with a wonderful outcome and a wonderful young Villa man. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Greg O'Neill and the head of middle school. Thank you, Mr. Begg, for leading us tonight, and we wish you all the best for the year ahead. On behalf of all of our middle school families, I'd like to welcome you as Year 7 and Year 8 parents back to our new academic year, and a very special welcome to our new Year 7 parents who are joining us at Villanova for the very first time. Well, the last 2 years have certainly presented a number of challenges for us as a global community. And closer to home, well, the last 2 months with the COVID outbreak has undoubtedly impacted us all. My family, your family, we've all been touched somehow by COVID-19 more recently. And again, I want to express my best wishes to all those families who are currently quarantining but tuning in, and to those who might be experiencing ill health. We hope that you get better soon. Over the course of 2020 and 2021, we started to use words like agile and pivot a little bit more regularly, and they became part of our vernacular. And yet again, as 2022 starts, here we are, not together online and needing to do something remotely. So I thank you for tuning in tonight, and I hope there's something there for each of you as parents to engage with. Relationships are the cornerstone of an Augustinian community. And maybe that's what makes it hard about tonight, not being having you here on site and not having you sit inside our classrooms and meet the teachers. Normally that's what would happen, but unfortunately we can't do that tonight. And what we've asked the staff to do is to record some presentations about themselves and a little bit about the way they run their classrooms and their expectations of your sons. So as I said, I hope there's some good information there that you'll be able to access. That is the goal of our parent information evenings. It's to provide you as parents with the information that you need and hopefully need and can use throughout the year as you guide your young boys through this really important time of adolescence. We've tried to find the balance for you tonight. There is such a thing as information overload, and we are conscious of not doing that tonight with the lengths of our presentations. I want to start tonight by talking a little bit about the macro and talk about what really matters in an all-boys education and what impact that's going to have for you as parents and for your sons as they navigate this middle school journey. To start off, let's have a look at what our middle school priorities are. And they are threefold. And for our Year 8 parents, you'll be familiar with a little bit of this content when we met last year. Our 3 middle school priorities, as you can see on the screen, are understanding who we teach, knowing what we teach and to make visible learning, and having an understanding of how we teach effectively. Your teachers tonight are going to spend some time talking about the programs that they have, the OneNotes, that make learning visible for your boys, and talk a little bit about the pedagogy that's going to be effective for your young men throughout the middle years. I want to focus a little bit more on the first one, understanding who we teach. I put up a slide here that depicts a statue that can be found in the university, Villanova University in Philadelphia in the United States of America. And it shows Augustine standing amongst a modern campus with 3 of his students, with backpacks, with books, with laptops. And we see here Augustine standing with and amongst his students. And it captures really well the essence of an Augustinian education, working with the students. And we want our students throughout the course of the next couple of weeks to form those really strong relationships with their teachers and vice versa, and lay foundations for a wonderful year ahead. We know that boys are relational, but we also know there's some real science to understanding what makes middle school boys tick. From a developmental point, we know that they undergo an incredible amount of change from the ages of 12 to 13 onwards. In fact, developmentally and neurologically, they probably stop growing and developing at an age of maybe the late 20s or early 30s, certainly from a brain development point of view. But throughout the teenage years, there's some things that as parents and as teachers, we want to pay attention to. Some of the science I've projected here. For example, our the boys' corpus callosum, 26% larger in adolescent girls than it is in adolescent boys. Now, that's the part of the brain that helps with change and helps with understanding when things change, being resilient. Boys don't have access to all of that. Then we need to make sure that stability is delivered in the classrooms and around the school. Boys need mentors, need parents who will listen, staff who will listen and support. We know that girls have more developed neuron connectors that create listening skills and memory storage. It means that teachers need to talk a little less, parents need to talk a little less, and find the right environments for when talk is going to be effective, and have the boys process that information through discovery or through peers or through collaboration. We know that boys have 15% less blood flow to their brains than girls, which means we need to divide things up into digestible chunks. If it's classroom content or their key messages about values and what's important, we need to break those down for the boys. We know that levels of serotonin and oxytocin are lower than girls, making boys more impulsive. So we need to understand the nature of boys. We need to find meaning and relevance in learning and in life's learnings. We need to give them choice and ownership of what it is that they do and develop those metacognitive skills. We should by now know that boys can be reluctant to share their feelings and emotions, and this is something that we need to foster in our men. It's going to take longer for them to express these things, so time is of the essence. And as I said, we know that relational pedagogy works. You might have seen this graph before, and it graphs those developmental changes nicely for us. And I want to talk to these 2 things tonight. First of all, our limbic system, which is the emotional epicenter of our brains, and our prefrontal cortex, which relates to our executive function, as it says there. You can see by this graph that these 2 develop at very different rates. And our limbic system matures and develops much faster than that prefrontal cortex. And you can see that maturity and full development only really occurs at around the age of the mid-20s. And we know, though, it's actually a little bit later than that as well. Let's have a look at these two systems. Our limbic system, our emotional epicenter. And for boys, and for all of us, that's made up of two major parts I want to talk to. The hippocampus, which is where we store and create our memories, and the amygdala, which is really where those emotions drive from. Emotions like pleasure, fear, reward, arousal, anger, as you can see. So the limbic system is the part that develops so much faster than the prefrontal cortex. And you can see over there, future planning, compassion, insight, emotional regulation, etc., weighing up consequences. The boys don't always have access to their prefrontal cortex during the adolescent years. Doesn't mean that they can't do those things. It doesn't mean they can't future plan. It doesn't mean that they can't regulate their emotions or have insight, but it is harder for them to do without accessing a fully developed prefrontal cortex. And quite often what happens is they rely back on their limbic system to do some of those things. So when it comes to making decisions or showing compassion or weighing up consequences, they're far more likely to be driven by emotion than rational thought. And as educators and as parents, we have to understand the imbalance there. You can see on the screen here that this time when the limbic system is well out ahead of our prefrontal cortex, they refer to this as the window of vulnerability. These are the times where we can see at-risk behaviours, times when the boys are acting without thinking of the consequences, be it in the classroom or a social setting or wherever that might be. There are ways, though, that as teachers and as parents, we can access that cortex. As I said, it might take a little bit longer, and we may not always get the results that we want. But there's 4 things that that help boys really get to that cortex. The first is having clear expectations from a parent, from a teacher, knowing what is expected of our young men, having it clearly defined for them is the first step. The second there, and you'll know for your sons, have a strong sense of justice. They'll always be thinking about what happened to someone else or what someone else's parent lets them do or what another teacher lets them do. So visible fairness and being able to assure that there is natural consequences and fairness and justice for boys is important. Predictability is important. Schools provide predictability. Holidays rarely do. And one of the struggles that we often see in the first few weeks, particularly of term 1, and particularly when holidays have been extended, is the boys' routine, predictability and consistency has lost, particularly from a schooling perspective. So re-establishing those routines, having safe, predictable spaces here at school are really important ways that we as educators and hopefully as parents can start to connect with that prefrontal cortex. At the end of last year, all middle school students were surveyed using an instrument called the Social Emotional Wellbeing Survey. And I want to share a little bit of this data with you now. Some of it is incredibly affirming, and some of it points to some of the risk factors that we need to pay attention to. Now, this, what you're seeing on the graphs here, the tables here, are last year's data. So year 7, where it says year 7, that's our current year 8s and so forth. And we've been doing this over about 10 years, so we have some reasonable longitudinal data that is highlighting some really good things and some things to pay attention to. If we have a look at the screen there's some amazing protective factors that are captured. Feeling connectedness to the school. And you can see that high rate against the schools nationally, which are captured in the right-hand column there. You can see connected to school is a really positive thing. Parents doing an amazing job in our context of making time for students, for their sons, ensure that they're listening, showing an interest in the boys' education. They're really critical protective factors that we can do. Even boys' self-efficacy about being a happy person. You can see that they're high there in the 90 percentile, against and slightly ahead of some of the students who've answered the survey across the country. You can see that they have some conflict management skills and understanding of what restorative practice and restorative justice looks like. And there's some skills there that highlight the work that has been done. And also they have strong social connections. They have friends that they perceive will work well, support them, and behave themselves. On the flip side, and I've drawn out 4 here that consistently across certainly the last 3 or 4 years, and one of the reasons why there's a greater investment in wellbeing throughout 2022 and beyond here at the college, are 4 things that I'd like to say are risk factors that we want to pay attention to. The boys' perception of how stressed they are, you can see there, and interestingly, an increase each year across 7, 8 and 9 is something that we're going to need to pay attention to. The boys perceive themselves as stressed. Now, the survey doesn't necessarily pick apart which avenues that stress is coming from, be it pressure to perform, deadline pressures here at school, pressures at home, parental pressures, teacher pressures. Doesn't talk about that, but certainly the boys' perception of themselves is that they are feeling stressed. And likewise, and maybe these are related, a level of disorganisation as well. That statement about I have a hard time controlling how worried I get probably reflects that stress one. And again, this is almost and up to 50%. Half of our Year 9 students last year felt like they struggled controlling their levels of worry. And then during the past 6 months, I've felt so hopeless and down almost every day for 1 week that I've stopped doing my usual activities. And again, we might look at that and think that they're low numbers, but that's 1 in 10 students or slightly higher, 15% students in 8 and 9 there, who are perceiving their life in that way. These are the reasons why we need to really invest in our young adolescent men and make sure those protective factors are really tight. And I'll show you some practical implications of that at the moment. But what I'm saying is effectively a middle school education that walks young men, adolescent men, through these difficult times has to have a holistic approach. And from our sense here, from a sense of middle schooling, there are 4 important things: that relational pedagogy and a culture of trust, relationships with parents and relationships with teachers, and creating that opportunity for boys to talk to their teachers, talk to their parents, and share those feelings are critically important. We need to have effective teaching strategies that target those developmental needs that I discussed at the start of this presentation, around breaking down bits of information, chunking it, finding opportunities to celebrate success, be them big or small. That we provide that social and emotional support for the boys, and that there's structures around them that will support them. What does that look like? And I guess a few takeaways for parents that I want to talk to. One of the things that we know about boys through that window of vulnerability is that risk-taking can occur. That impulsive behaviour, that seeking out, that exciting thing to do, however that might manifest for your young man. The reality is over the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see an increased level of pushing of boundaries and subsequent risk-taking. But boys love limits, and boys do respond well to boundaries, even if they might regularly push up against them. Those boundaries are what keeps them safe. I talked to the Year 7s last year, so our Year 8 parents will be familiar with this concept of access and opportunity. And I'll talk more about this with our Year 9 parents this week, and again when you get into Year 9. But I graph access and opportunity this way, and it might help you with your boys or with your parenting to understand a little bit about the importance of keeping our young men safe. The high-risk areas that we see with young men is when they have access to something they shouldn't have access to, and then have the opportunity to use it or experience it. And one of the factors, the 2 factors that are in our control sometimes, is limiting access or limiting opportunity. When we're able to do that, we can reduce the risk and find ourselves in that low-risk environment. But that might not always be possible. And if I think to the experience of last year, where in 2020 and 2019, the concept of a vape was probably not something we were talking about. But our experience of last year taught us that access to vapes through external means became something of an issue for us. It was possible for young men to access vapes. All they required then was the opportunity to get them and then to use them for that high-risk activity to occur. So as a school and as parents, we asked to work in partnership in being highly vigilant about these things, reducing the amount of access that they might have to explore the world, to get out with mates and not be accountable for where they were and what they were doing. And at the same time, referring places that were illegally selling vapes to minors and so forth, reducing the access and reducing the opportunity for them to do that. This graph will manifest itself in a lot of different ways for a lot of different boys, but we need to pay attention to the opportunities that we give our boys and will there be access there to be doing something that they shouldn't be doing. Sleep. And I know that Matt McGrath in Year 8 will talk explicitly about sleep to the boys and will have mentioned in his Year 8 presentation. But we know that a well-rested brain, which processes new classroom learning into short-term memory, needs REM sleep on the subsequent night to file this learning into long-term memory banks. Sleep plays an incredible role for all of us, but a special role for our young men. They need it to recover and rebuild given the level of physical growth and neurological growth that they're experiencing. But importantly that is where they convert something they've learnt throughout the day into their long-term memory banks. And boys that we know can be resistant to sleep, particularly getting to bed early. And in our presentation, we'll explain to the boys that every hour, it may well be a myth, but every hour before midnight is almost worth two. So finding a way to get to bed early and really maximise that sleep opportunities and ensuring, particularly on weeknights, that we're getting a consistent bedtime, wake-up time and 9 hours. And we know that screen time, particularly in the last hour leading up to sleep, makes it really difficult for our young boys to get away. Organisation, as I mentioned at the start, it's something that our boys tell us that they feel like they're not well organised. We can assist with that as well as parents and as teachers, ensuring that they have their belongings together and they're not feeling out of control with their belongings. That's probably all I'm going to present tonight. I look forward to getting the opportunity later in the year to meet with each of you, both in person in interviews and perhaps also more broadly as a cohort as well. The next part of the night is the pastoral area leaders, Ms. Sheridan Carey in Year 7 and Mr. Matt McGrath in Year 8, want to present a little bit about the sorts of support that they offer for their young men. Before then, we pass to your son's teachers to give some insight about their classroom practice and expectations. I wish you all the best for the journey ahead. I'm sorry again that we are not in person this evening, and I look forward to a time soon when that will occur. I know that the staff, both the pastoral leaders and the teachers, will mention this, but if there is something that you wish to reach out to us about, I can't encourage enough to pick up the phone or shoot an email through so we can support your young man as best we can throughout these middle years. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matthew McGrath and I'm the Year 8 Pastoral Area Leader. My job this year is to support your son through Year 8. And there may be some challenges and there may be some ups and downs. And we want to work together to make sure your son has a successful year. Initially, I'd like to talk about adolescent development. And I know Mr. O'Neill touched on this. During the ages of 12 to 14, your sons are going through physical, mental, emotional and spiritual changes. They become more aware of the complexity of the world they live in, and in particular, their social connectedness becomes far more significant. As a primary school student, your son would likely want to impress his coaches, instructors, teachers, and you, his parents. As he gets a little bit older, this changes. His peers have a far more influence on him, and that need for connectedness becomes so much stronger. Look, with this, there can be some risk-taking behaviour. Last year, we saw some evidence of vaping at Villanova College. And I'm fairly confident to say that the majority of the boys who got involved in vaping did this through peer group pressure and wanting to impress their mates. The boys will also be exploring their sexuality. And you might have already noticed this one at home. There may be a lack of communication with parents. When you greet your son, you may not get the same happy young boy you had. You may get groans and moans, which I understand can be a little bit frustrating. I would also like to question the notion kids of today have it so much easier. Look, being a teenager is far more complicated than it was 20 or 30 years ago. When I was a young man, I would play a little bit of sport after school, go home, have some dinner, maybe hop on the phone to a friend for 10 to 15 minutes, and that would be my evening with a little bit of TV. Now boys have to navigate the world of phones, social media, and look, social media is a big one, because with social media there is a fear of missing out. It's called FOMO. And because social media is 24/7, the boys feel like their friends are having conversations and they need to be involved in them. So it is a massive distraction for them when they're doing things like their homework. Even late at night, if they know their mates are online, they want to be part of that conversation because they think they're missing out. They also have access to information and material that is sometimes not reliable and sometimes not appropriate. So those temptations are there. And the question I'd like to ask is, are they equipped with the strategies to navigate this world? In our personal development program, we try and develop these strategies. We start with goal setting and then learning how to learn, where they look at their approach to study. Time management is also important, and we do a unit on sleep. We then delve into social media, cyberbullying, gaming, and of course, we need to do something on e-cigarettes at the moment. They're becoming very popular, not just at Villanova College, but in all schools around Brisbane. I'd also like to briefly talk about my homework expectations for the year. Recently, I showed the boys a video. It was a basketball video with Steph Curry, and it just had a little quote in it, which I think is really good. Are your habits of today on par with your dreams of tomorrow? Are you developing study habits now that you can take forward with you to tomorrow? And developing those good study habits now will lay a foundation for your son's senior year. So my expectation is that the boys do around 1 hour and 15 minutes of homework every night. Each teacher in their discussion will talk about how much homework they will be setting. But you will find that the majority of homework will come from maths and science, whereas your humanities subjects will be assignment-based work. So boys will need to catch up on what they did in class, and then they'll need to be completing their assignments. So approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes per night, and trying to do that without the mobile phone in front of them, without the distractions, will make it a lot better. I find if boys have YouTube on in the background, you really do need to double the time they take to do their homework because there's such a big distraction for them. Another goal I would like your son to be setting is to have a positive working relationship with his teacher. Now, some strategies to do this, first of all, is to be organised for class, to engage in the lesson and ask questions. Teachers love it when boys ask questions. I know some boys are shy and that's difficult for them, but it's a good way of communicating with your teacher. Use the teacher feedback your teacher gives you effectively. I know teachers spend hours and hours, particularly the humanities teachers, on essay drafts giving feedback. And if students use that effectively and ask the teacher questions about that feedback, it goes a long way to improving their grade. And look, the last one is wear your uniform neatly. If you don't wear your uniform neatly, the teacher has to challenge. For instance, pull up your socks, tuck your shirt in. If the first interaction between the teacher and your son every day is challenging him about wearing his uniform, it does erode the relationship between the student and the teacher. It just makes it more difficult. The conversation's not positive, it starts with a negative. So if boys just wear their uniform neatly and they come into class appropriately, the interaction starts off positively, which is a much, much better way to start the lesson. Look, I want to leave it with a short story, and I'm not going to read it word for word. You can pause the video and have a bit of a look. But it's just an analogy that one of our school counsellors uses, and it's children really are dogs and teenagers are cats. And I really like this story, and I've got 2 daughters myself, and I can relate to it. A boy in grade 5 and 6 is more like a dog, happy to see you, eager to be around you all the time, keen to impress. Unfortunately, as they develop to 12, 13, sometimes 14, things change. They become a little bit more like a cat, a little bit less connected, wanting to do their own thing, wanting to eat meals in their own time, probably not looking for the same amount of affection as they once did, although they will occasionally want affection, but maybe not to the same extent. And they've changed to a cat. Now, parents get really worried about this because they're used to their dog. Their dog is very friendly. And all of a sudden, they think there's something wrong with their son because he's no longer a dog. But in fact, he's a cat, and you need to realize he's a cat and make the appropriate adjustments to deal with a cat. And look, the majority of the time, they come around. It can take a few years, but typically around grades 10 and 11, your adolescent teenage son will come back to being a dog, and he'll be looking for a little bit more affection, a little bit more attention, and a little bit more support from you guys. Alrighty, thank you for your time. Please do not hesitate to give me a call or email me if you'd like me to follow up on anything or you have any concerns. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Leah Belson, and I am the English, History and Geography teacher for Year 8 Blue and Red. Welcome. So I've already had the boys for a week, and we've had lots of chats about the expectations of the classroom, and certainly respect and courtesy, respecting the rights of each student to learn and respecting the rights of the teacher to teach. We make a committed and sincere effort each time we walk in the classroom, and that is shown as being organised. Our uniform is nice and neat and tidy. We're communicating with each other respectfully and also asking for help, and that help can be from me, it can be from their peers. So in English and history this term, for English we are reading Julius Caesar, and it's a graphic novel based on the Shakespearean play, and the assessment is a short story, and it's based on Brutus's character development and how he makes decisions and what happens to him at the end. And so the boys are pretty into that so far, which is awesome. In history, we are exploring the Vikings and the Viking Age, and the assessment is a research assignment. So across the humanities subjects, there's a focus on an Augustinian style of education. So we're certainly developing their skills and knowledge of Cornell note-taking, their research skills, their inquiry questions, use of a research booklet, making sure that we are referencing correctly, grammar and spelling across English and humanities is super important. Using Write That Essay, and the boys are really great at knowing that they've got access to that tool if they need to, working on their analytical thinking, and all of this leads to a love of learning that we really want for our boys here. Importantly, so we've got homework and assignments. Look, I don't give that much homework. It's more about if we don't get all the work complete, or I want them to have a bit more background knowledge, a bit more content knowledge prior to us working on our skills, then that will be part of the homework, and that we'll write that in our diaries and it will be in OneNote. Speaking of OneNote, all of the actual lessons will go in there. However, they don't go in straight away. So I deliver the lessons. I'll create something that I can put online, particularly if we need to have that online learning style again. So it is ready to go, but I deliver it in a way that I want the boys to be engaged in our in-class face-to-face learning. That said, we put in the activities. They still work in their books. They work in their OneNote. It's a lot of hands-on stuff as well. And if your child happens to be at home for an extended period of time, those explicit lessons, those teaching and learning experiences, will go into their individual OneNote earlier than the end of the week. So it's always going to be available for them. It's just communication and letting me know. We have access to online textbooks. So for history, we've got Connect History 8. So thank you so much. I hope that that's given you some information. Now, if you would like to know anything else, please feel free to email me or give me a call and I can call you back at the school. If your son has any doubts, please encourage him to come and have a chat with me. I'm more than happy to help. I'm very excited to be here with the boys at Villa, and thank you for entrusting me with your sons. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matt McGrath and I'll be your son's maths and science teacher this year. I hope this video will be helpful. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the guiding principles for all Year 8 students this year. It comes from the acronym GREAT: growth, respect, effort, accountability, teamwork and service. I won't unpack this for you now, but I certainly will with the boys. I would just like to say that Red has got off to a fantastic start. They're certainly being respectful, they're putting effort into their work, they're accountable for their work. We do need to work on organisation a little bit. Unfortunately, some of the boys are beginning to bring all of their gear to class. It's just something we can work on. But we're off to a great start. Homework. Look, for all of Year 8 students, I'd expect that they complete about 1 hour and 15 minutes of homework per night. Now, I know the boys have busy schedules, they have music and sporting commitments, and sometimes getting homework can be difficult. If you could please write a note in their diary or shoot me an email if that occurs, so we can keep those communication lines open. My expectation is also that homework is written in the diary. So if you want to see what your son has for homework, you should be able to have a look in his diary. In the curriculum for Maths and Science this term, we have for mathematics, we're going to start off with integers and indices. Then we're going to work on fractions and decimals, and then algebra. In science, we're going to do safety in the lab first, and then look at physics. I'll be using Class OneNote for every lesson in both maths and science. You'll find that the sections will be fairly well organised with clear expectations for every lesson for every day. This is an example of a maths one. You'll notice there's a video embedded. I will have a video embedded in most of the lessons, but not all of them. I don't always use the videos in class, but they're a great resource for the boys to have if they need to go back and have a look for a revision. You'll also notice there'll be clear expectations of what work needs to be completed that day. In the Class OneNote, you'll also notice there will be a term outline for both mathematics and science. I'd like to briefly talk about assessment, in particular in mathematics. There'll be a test every term in mathematics and one assignment in term 3. Now, the test will always be out of 51 marks. There'll be 31 marks for simple familiar, 10 for complex familiar, and 10 for complex unfamiliar. At the end of each term, the boys will be given a revision sheet. Now, that revision sheet will have all of the simple familiar questions embedded in it. It will have examples of complex familiar and complex unfamiliar questions as well. So it's really important that the boys know that revision sheet exceptionally well if they want to be successful in the test. I also want to briefly talk about problem solving, because to do well in the complex unfamiliar questions, it's important that boys engage in problem solving questions throughout the term. You will notice at the bottom of the OneNote there is a page for problem solving. There will be one there for each chapter. I will no doubt be doing some of these questions in class and working through the solutions to them, but if your son has some spare time at home, he can always do some problem solving questions. In science, the boys will be using Style as they did in Year 7. Style is a great digital resource. It's a website. It has content and interactive activities for the boys to work with. The boys really enjoy using it. Most of the science homework will be from Style. If you have any questions you'd like answered and would like to have a quick look yourself, there's some places you can go to. Parent Cafe is a good starting point. In Parent Cafe, you'll have your son's timetable, his assessment calendar. You'll also have access to his results and some feedback on those results. Now, they don't typically come out until about 2 weeks after the assessment item has been submitted. OneNote is not as accessible for you as a parent. You do need to jump onto your son's laptop to access OneNote, but that's where you can have a look at the term outlines and so forth. We do have a textbook for mathematics that is in Box of Books. Your son can access that and actually download a PDF version of the book, which makes it much quicker for him on a daily basis. Look, I want to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me, and I encourage your son to come and ask me questions throughout the year. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Kemp and I'm the Middle School RE Curriculum Area Leader. This year we see a change in RE across our Year 8 model. Instead of having the same teacher as your English and history, we actually now have RE as a separate course subject, and I'm really excited to introduce this new team to you. Our focus remains the same. Middle School RE is about how we can be keepers of the flame. How can we share and show Jesus' mission in our actions each day and into the future? Our program over Year 8 sees the first semester look at where we've come from, where the boys in Term 1 will examine Acts of the Apostles and look at our earliest church. We then move into Term 2, looking at church history, which is essentially the Middle Ages. We're asking the boys to look at what people in our early history have done, how they overcame challenges, how they showed resilience and perseverance to continue to live out Jesus' mission. Our second semester sees us immerse the boys in how we can be keepers, and it's a social justice focus with a core part being our Augustinian values. So Unit 3 sees them walk in the shoes of a refugee coming to Australia. We look at the messages from our prophets in the Old Testament and the promises made, and then we move into the social justice and the Catholic social teachings and how we can live out the common good and show human dignity. Unit 4 is a very reflective task. The boys will undergo their own rite of passage as they transition from Year 8 into Year 9 and the leaders of the middle school. The Augustinian values that we focus on in this one are interiority and that search for truth, to uncover who we are right now, but who we would like to become as we move into Year 9 and then into our senior school and our final chapters of our journey at Villanova. The expectations for RE remain the same as other core subjects. There is one assessment per term, and the focus is on the engagement and participation in the learning and the activities, with that core focus on how we can be keepers. The aim is the boys to leave middle school RE with an understanding that they make the difference and they can create the world that they live in. Our teachers will be using OneNote and Teams as our platforms to engage with our students. So if your son is away at any point, please ask him to check in with those in a similar notion. If they are not understanding or not quite sure, they can check the OneNote for resources or even use Teams to engage with their classmates and their teacher. Absolutely everything your son needs to be successful is through these platforms, and they're encouraged to regularly use these to extend and revise on their knowledge. They of course need an exercise book as well for RE. Unit 1 has a strong focus on mindfulness and meditation. This is a core skill that is really important for our middle school boys to foster. We need them to be able to think calmly and proactive through stressful times as they navigate these different worlds. We're seeing the boys transition from a co-teaching space to now multiple teachers, multiple rooms, and obviously adolescents. So we're trying to get them to not react, but be proactive. We will be doing meditations throughout the term, and generally each lesson your boys will engage in a short or to a longer meditation. The assessment has the boys draw on inspiration from our early Christians, St. Stephen, St. Peter, St. Paul, and of course St. Augustine, and what we can use or draw from them in order to navigate our pandemic world, how we can overcome the challenges that we face in our everyday life. The recording will be the podcast will be done by recording, and I really encourage your sons to use a platform that they are comfortable with. They must be able to export it. In my classes, we go pretty simple and we use Screencast and PowerPoint because it's very easy to export them. My Year 8 RE team is a really exciting and a really experienced team. We welcome Leah and Sean Hodgson to Villa, and we also welcome Rob Korst into the Year 8 team. Alex Sullivan, our Year 9 coordinator, is part of that as well, as am I. I'd ask you to just check in with the colour your son is in, and that's the teacher that you would make direct contact with if you have any issues with your son or any concerns about them. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to sharing the journey with your boys through that Year 8 program this year.
I'd just like to thank everyone for listening this evening. I hope it's been informative for you. Please don't hesitate to give me a call or an email if you have any concerns or would like to have a chat. Thank you.